Women wants to become self-reliant, and for that reason, she is beginning to enlighten men about women as such. This is one of the worst developments of the general uglification of Europe. First hear that, you're just like, this is the most misogynistic take of all time. Basically what he's saying is that women being scientific, being logical, they shouldn't do that. That's not for them. That is for men, right? You put that in a modern context, that sounds as misogynistic as possible. Why is that, right? But from Nietzsche's worldview, it's a compliment. This is going to make sense in a second. Friedrich Nietzsche is often unfairly characterized as a misogynist. I mean, I'm going to put some text up on the screen right now, and it's very clear when you read these, you're just like, dude, this guy's a textbook misogynist. What I'm going to make the claim for in this video, I'm going to cite a bunch of evidence. Most of my videos are unscripted and extemporaneous. This one I've actually sort of scripted a little bit. More specifically, I took notes and I'm going to read specific passages of Nietzsche. Anyway, I'm going to make the argument here that he is truly an actual feminist in the true sense of the word. Not like the modern feminazi type of thing, like actually somebody who truly understands women and truly appreciates them for how they are. All right? Now, I'm going to mostly be using Beyond Good and Evil as a reference here. That's the book that I read the most by him. So anyway, let's first start off with how he presents the entire book of what Beyond Good and Evil is. The very first line is, suppose truth was a woman, what then? And funny enough, that passage actually isn't about women. It's more about how philosophers look at the truth as something to be desired, something that they're passionate about. It's actually anti-logical. And because of that, they try to seek the truth the same way that they try to seek women, right? It's an object of their desire, and then they will do whatever it takes to attain that object of desire, including telling lies. And this is very interesting because the beginning or the first section of Beyond Good and Evil, sort of what he talks about is that we need to lie or create lies in order to live, because we can never actually truly know what the truth is. And typically when somebody claims to know the truth, it's actually their truth, which again, because they look at the truth as a woman, they will do whatever it takes to make the world in their own image, because their reality is always just viewed through their own perspective lens of the world, right? And so basically he's saying, it's actually a very humble take, is that we don't actually know what the truth is. So we have to sort of almost make a leap of faith, dare I say, to live a sort of lie that is life affirming. Because otherwise you just will be pondering about life all day. You'll just have analysis paralysis. You won't really do anything with your life, right? That's why with Nietzsche, it's very important to be not just philosophical, but be a man of action. That's what the ideal man or the overman is, the Ubermensch, is somebody who takes action, right? Not just theorizing about life all day. So Nietzsche would much prefer somebody like Napoleon, who goes out there and does stuff, than some theorists, including himself, by the way. So anyway, where does women come into this? So he has a very specific section of Beyond Good and Evil. It's in the section Our Virtues at the very end. And I'm going to bring up some historical people here, more specifically famous French people that I had to do a lot of research on to understand fully what he's saying. Because I've read Beyond Good and Evil multiple times, and this part has always confused me, and I think I've finally sort of gotten a grasp on it. So before I start, let me read aphorism 232 of Beyond Good and Evil as a starting point. There's a few aphorisms here that he talks about, women in particular, and this is all going to make sense. So if a lot of this is flying over your head right now, trust me, I was there, but it'll make sense hopefully after I explain it, okay? So anyway, this is aphorism 232. Women wants to become self-reliant, and for that reason, she is beginning to enlighten men about women as such. This is one of the worst developments of the general uglification of Europe. Now, when you first hear that, that sounds very misogynistic, right? I'm going to explain to you how that's not misogynistic at all. It's actually quite the opposite. For what must these clumsy attempts of women at scientific self-exposure bring to light? Women has much reason for shame, so much pedantry, superficiality, schoolmarmishness, petty presumption, petty licentiousness, and immodesty lies concealed in woman. One only needs to study her behavior with children. And so far, all this was at the bottom, best repressed and kept under control by fear of man. Woe when the eternally boring in women, she is rich in that, is permitted to venture forth. When she begins to unlearn thoroughly and on principle her prudence and art, of grace and play, of chasing away worries, of lightening burdens and taking things lightly, and her subtle aptitude for agreeable desires. Even now female voices are heard which, holy Aristophanes, are frightening. They threaten with medical explicitness what women wants from man, first and last. Is it not the worst taste when women sets about becoming scientific that way? So far, enlightenment of this sort was fortunately man's affair, man's lot. We remained among ourselves in this. And whatever women write about women, we may in the end reserve a healthy suspicion whether women really wants enlightenment about herself, whether she can will it. Unless a woman seeks a new adornment for herself, that way, I do think adorning herself is part of the eternal feminine. She surely wants to inspire fear of herself. Perhaps she seeks mastery, but she does not want truth. What is truth to a woman? Hostile to woman than truth, her great art is the lie. Her highest concern is more appearance and beauty. Let us men confess it. We honor and love precisely this art and this instinct in woman. We who have a hard time and for our relief like to associate with beings under whose hands, eyes, and tender follies our seriousness, our gravity, and profundity almost appear to us like folly. Finally, I pose a question. Has ever a woman conceded profundity to a woman's head or justice to a woman's heart? And is it not true on the whole that women has so far been despised most by women herself, and by no means by us? We men wish that women should not go on compromising herself through enlightenment, just as it was man's thoughtfulness and consideration for woman that found in the church decree women should be silent in church. It was for women's good, and Napoleon gave the all too eloquent Madame de Staël to understand women should be silent in politics. And I think it is a real friend of women that counsels them today, women should be silent about women. Okay, so that was a bit long, but when you first hear that, you're just like, this is the most misogynistic take of all time. Basically what he's saying is that women being scientific, being logical, they shouldn't do that. That's not for them. That is for men, right? You put that in a modern context, that sounds as misogynistic as possible. Why is that, right? But from Nietzsche's worldview, it's a compliment. This is going to make sense in a second. So the Western tradition, spearheaded by, the three main Greek philosophers that everybody knows, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, the whole idea was that they sort of demonized the passions. They said that, being logical and having a logical order to how we explain the world, right? That is what is ideal, The passions distract us. And that was sort of a revolutionary way of thinking in Greek thought back then, because before then, the Greeks were very much more passionate about life, They weren't always just like, oh, the brain and logic is superior to everything. No, they were very in touch with their emotions. And the very first book that Nietzsche wrote, called The Birth of Tragedy, he kind of talks about how there's two different states or modes of being that human beings had that's expressed in art. So one is the Dionysian and the other is the Apollonian. So the Apollonian is more about like logic and order and whatnot, and the Dionysian is much more about just chaos and emotions. And so if we look at the feminine versus the masculine, the feminine, you could argue, is more in line with the Dionysian. And Nietzsche's not against the Apollonian by any means, but he basically thinks that the world that we're in now is way too logos-based, right? Because we live in a Christian world. So Christianity is inherently a logos-based religion. In the Bible, God says, I am the truth with a capital T. And so Nietzsche wants to stray away from that a bit because we've gone too far in that direction. the whole idea, the advent of science, that is a Christian invention. Christians wanted to become scientific and came up with a scientific method to become closer to God, to discover his world, right? This is also why he says, God is dead and we have killed him. Our curiosity and our want to try to become closer to God is actually what led us to the truth that we're all just a bunch of apes. And hence, God is dead and we have killed him. Anyway, that's besides the point. So, if you look at it through the lens of we need to be more emotional, that this whole logical, whatever way of viewing the world and losing touch with our passions is actually a bad thing, then what he talks about there is not only not a misogynist, it's actually complimenting women. He basically says that women are more in touch with their emotions than anything. And this is a highly some people will interpret this way differently, including the guy that made the translation of this text, Walter Kaufman. I think he gets it completely wrong here. I might cover that in this video. But where does it say? Okay, so remember how I said that at the beginning of Beyond Good and Evil, he basically makes the claim that we need to create our own lives in order to live, right? So this part makes perfect sense with that framing. But she does not want truth. What is truth to a woman? Again, suppose truth was a woman. What then? From the beginning, nothing has been more alien, repugnant, and hostile to women than the truth. Her great art is the lie. Her highest concern is mere appearance and beauty. This is something that Nietzsche wants his readers to embrace more. This is why Nietzsche actually, for women who really understood him, he actually had a lot of women who were, during his lifetime, he wasn't very popular in his lifetime, but a surprising amount of them, of his followers, were women, because he's actually complimenting them here. We just assume, again, based off of our society, based off the values we've been raised in the West, that to seek the truth is a good thing, that being logical or whatever is inherently good, and then being emotional and passionate is irrational, and because it's irrational, it's not good. He's saying the exact opposite here. Women, their natural state isn't to try to just seek the truth and that's it. They actually want to live more passionately, more Dionysian. This is just incredible how a lot of people, they just completely skip over this, or they don't see it. Now, he actually gives an example here, because sometimes you can read that and be like, oh, well, that's a very interesting interpretation, whatever. The very next aphorism that he has confirms exactly what I'm saying. And this is where a little bit of history comes in. I had to do some research on who these people were, so I'll read it to you. This is aphorism 233. It betrays a corruption of the instincts, quite apart from the fact that it betrays bad taste, when a woman adduces Madame Roland, or Madame de Stael, or Monsieur George Sand, of all people, as if they proved in favor of women as such. I'll explain to what women as such means in a second. Among men, these three are the three comical women as such, nothing more, and precisely the best involuntary counter-arguments against emancipation and feminine vainglory. Okay, so what does all that mean? First of all, let me explain what women as such mean, or when anything in philosophy where it says something as such. So this is popularized by, again, the aforementioned famous Greeks, more specifically Plato and Aristotle, that everything sort of has an essence, right? So it's like, okay, so there's this tree. There's these trees behind me, all right? Some trees are nicer than others, but for us, we have to compare. Okay, so if we say a tree is bad or misshapen, these are all palm trees. If these are good palm trees or bad palm trees, somewhere in our mind, we have this idea of what the perfect palm tree is, in which we compare it to the palm tree, right? This is Plato's idea of the world of forms. And there's something within each of these. I think this is more Aristotle that pointed this out, that there's an essence to everything. There's something about the palm tree that makes it a palm tree, the thing in itself. There's something about the palm, it's the palm treeness, whatever it is, right? At some point, if I just start chopping the tree down, at what point is it not a palm tree anymore? And so if we kind of take this logic out and extrapolate it to also human beings as well, there's something about females, there's something about males that makes them a male, that makes them a female. So when they say women as such, it's in scare quotes, because he's basically saying a lot of feminists and stuff who are actually, for the most part, anti-women, they're claiming that femininity is, there's an essential essence to femininity. And what's key with Nietzsche's philosophy is that he doesn't believe that there's an essence to anything at all, that there's all these conflicting forces and the will to power. I'll go way, that'll be too much for this video. Anyway, he actually thinks that it's an insult to say that there is an essential essence to a woman, something that is inherent, or beings that are more in touch with the Dionysian side, the more passionate side, that you try to reduce them down to just one core thing. That's actually a masculine concept of, the will to truth that men have perpetuated, that women have, they've kind of imbibed that poison at their own expense. And so basically what he's saying here is that the examples that he's given, I'll give you quick little stories of what each of these women are, who each of these women are. So Madame Roland and Madame de Staël were influential figures during the French Revolution. So Madame Roland specifically, she was highly influential in politics. However, she was always working from the background. She would hold these, there's this concept in France called the salon, where like all these intellectuals and stuff will just meet in like someone's house, and they would just have all these intellectual discussions and stuff. And so she would host these, and she was the wife of a politician. And she herself promoted and said, okay, well, women should be working in the background to be influential in politics. They shouldn't actually be in the foreground. They shouldn't be that obvious. This is actually where true power lies within a woman, where they work in the background, not in the foreground. And this is something that Nietzsche, again, talks about, that his philosophers of the future, his readers, should be doing. They should be hiding in the shadows. They should have a mask. They shouldn't be super upfront, not necessarily about what they really think, but they don't necessarily have to be like these celebrities and stuff, because the herd, the vast majority of people, the commoners, the majority, won't be able to handle the truths that they espouse and the things that they talk about. The herd will, especially if they're actually talking about things that are meaningful, they're probably going to be things that are painful, which the vast majority of the population is probably going to reject. So it's better to be working in the background, influencing influential people to relay that message instead. Or you could just straight up, there's multiple ways to interpret it. Maybe you could even say that you have to sort of fake your personality and espouse truths. I mean, that's one way to put it too. But anyway, this is something that women are great at. If you look at, Nietzsche loved Greek mythology, and just the Greeks in general, but you look at some of the most powerful people in history. Cleopatra basically just manipulated and these very powerful Romans, Mark Antony, Julius Caesar. You look at the Iliad, Helen of Troy was sort of like, the whole entire war was fought over her. She was, maybe indirectly, she was pulling the strings of like Paris, and then also her Spartan husband before, I forgot his name, Menelaus. And so this is the power of woman. The very thing that Nietzsche is promoting here is a strength of women. And he's actually saying that men have corrupted themselves with the pursuit of truth and have lost that Dionysian part of themselves. So in a way, what you could actually say in this is that he is promoting, men to actually become more in touch with their feminine side, but not in like the way that most people would characterize modern women. Again, this is why he says women as such in scare quotes, because a lot of people, even back in his day, would just fantasize and project what they think women should be. And usually the things that they think women should be is more like men. And he's saying that that's the exact opposite. And a great example of this is actually Monsieur George Sand. So you hear George Sand, you're just like, and especially Monsieur before that, that's a guy, right? George Sand was a woman. She was an influential writer who, because she knew she wouldn't be accepted if she was a woman, she wrote under the pseudonym George Sand. And then over time, as people were just like, oh, this George Sand is a literary genius, she's amazing, or he's amazing, she slowly sort of revealed that that was a pen name. She was actually a woman. So she actually deceived the public at first that couldn't accept her because women can't write, right? she actually deceived the French public first that she was a man, and then once people were fans of this man, George Sand, and they're like, who is this man? She revealed slowly that she's a woman, and then people actually ended up, for the most part, accepting her as a woman afterwards. But that was sort of the deceptive game that she was playing, right? And so basically what he's saying here is that by trying to have women become more logical and convince them, oh, you should become more like men, that, women are just as, whatever as men are, it's actually antithetical to helping women out. And this is why he also casts some blame on, I have to find the passage here, but I think it's something, he says something like, shallow men support this stuff because these men who don't actually appreciate women want to make them more like men. And in a way, that's actually misogynist, because what they're really saying is, we don't think women are that great, so let's transform them to be more like men. Let's go through a few other passages here. I penciled this part in, so I imagine it's important. So let me read it. Since the French Revolution, women's influence in Europe has decreased proportionately as her rights and claims have increased, and the emancipation of women, insofar as that is demanded and promoted by women themselves and not merely shallow males, is thus seen to be an odd symptom of the increasing weakening and dulling of the most feminine instincts. There is stupidity in this movement, an almost masculine stupidity of which a woman who had turned out well, and such women are always prudent, would have to be thoroughly ashamed. See, that's exactly what he's talking about right there. Of these shallow men who really just don't understand women, don't even actually appreciate them, want to turn them more like men, and convince women that they're more like that. And then these same women, corrupted by that wrong idea, then end up trying to push feminism, which is an actual appreciation of women. And then it just spirals, right? And so really what's happening here is that, again, the fact that Nietzsche considers himself a Dionysian is so important. Women are losing that side of themselves. Men have already lost that side of themselves. They're naturally not as in tune with that in the first place. And so now you have people who have a bastardized concept of what a woman even is, based off of male influence, by the way, to promote women to be more like men and men to become even more like men. Again, just in a Nietzschean worldview of being more Apollonian, being more logical, whatever, and not being Dionysian. Nietzsche considered himself a disciple of Dionysus. In one of his last texts, The Antichrist, he basically says that the Antichrist is Dionysus, that instead of worshiping Christ, we should worship Dionysus, Again, it's not necessarily that Dionysus is superior to Apollo or the other gods, it's just that sort of passion, it's gone. It's gone in the West, And women are typically the ones that are actually in tune with that. And so, I know this video is kind of all over the place. This is really tough to do just off the top of my head. I thought about it a lot this morning and all that, and I think maybe on my main channel eventually I'm going to do a much deeper analysis of this concept. But if you ever think that Nietzsche is a woman-hating incel, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And actually, this is where Walter Kaufmann fucks up too. Because he actually has these annotations here and there. And he is so wrong on this one thing. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. So even Nietzsche translators and supposed expert Nietzsche scholars like Walter Kaufmann don't understand this as well. So let me read this passage for you. This is from Aphorism 238. To go wrong on the fundamental problem of man and woman, to deny the most abysmal antagonism between them and the necessity of an eternally hostile tension, to dream perhaps of equal rights, equal education, equal claims and obligations, that is a typical sign of shallowness. And a thinker who has proved shallow in this dangerous place, shallow in his instinct, may be considered altogether suspicious, even more, betrayed, exposed. Probably he will be too short for all of the fundamental problems of the life yet to come too, and incapable of attaining any depth. You hear that, you're just like, what, women shouldn't have equal rights? Women shouldn't have... That's so misogynistic. And this is what Walter Kaufmann thinks, that he's dead wrong, and I'll explain why in a second. So this is what he says as an annotation. He says, fortunately for Nietzsche, this is surely wrong, but it is worth asking which, if any, of His other ideas are of a place with his second-hand wisdom about women, probably his embarrassingly frequent invocation of severity and hardness and other such terms, the almost ritual repetition of the words, not necessarily, if at all, the spiritualized concepts he develops with their aid, and perhaps also the tenor of his remarks about democracy and parliaments. Anyway, like even an expert like Kaufman doesn't understand this, okay? Nietzsche, this is another thing, but Nietzsche fundamentally thinks that tension, war, conflict is what creates something beautiful, right? Including a war between the sexes. There's like, what is attraction between men and women? It is the polarity between the sexes. It's the cat and mouse game. It's the shit testing each other. It's the making fun of each other. It's the teasing each other. The feminine and the masculine challenging each other, and then through that challenge, creating something beautiful and amazing and wonderful. And so if you give everybody equal rights and equal spheres of influence, I should say, then people just become more like each other. Women become more like men, you know? Or in another universe, men become more like women. And then that passion for life is gone. And so even somebody like I said, it's disappointing that somebody like Walter Kaufman doesn't freaking understand this. And this is why he says that somebody who doesn't understand that the difference between the sexes, the difference between men and women is important. And because of that, we should have different rights and different spheres of influence. If you don't understand that you are a shallow person, you're surface level. If you can't see beyond just the idea of what equal rights are. The whole idea is to look beyond things like good and evil, beyond morality, right? So equal rights is the same exact thing. Women work best in the background. Women work best when they are passionate, when they are able to express their femininity and their lovingness, and not just their lovingness, but their hatred. Women tend to hate and love super hard. Like, dude, for me, my girlfriend, one of the reasons I absolutely love her to death is because she doesn't try to act like a dude, all right? Sometimes she is like a little cute demon where she's just super upset at something I said. And then the next moment, she's the most lovable person ever, right? It's almost like a little gremlin, except she's way better looking. But I love that. I love that roller coaster of emotions. That's part of what makes life interesting and fun and amazing. And then imagine if she just has this sort of Western influence to say like, no, be more logical, be more scientific. This is freeing for you. She loses that passion. She loses that amazing side of her. And then I probably wouldn't be attracted to her anymore. And she likes being that way. That's who she is, right? And so actual real feminists, I guess, whatever you call them, if they truly understand Nietzsche, they will look at Nietzsche as a true feminist, as somebody who really supports women. But unfortunately, a lot of people who just take the modern conception of what a woman should be, again, a woman as such, that the essence of a woman is something similar to a man, then they'll look at that through that lens and say Nietzsche's a misogynist. It could not be further from an actual misogynist, man. This is why reading Nietzsche is so enlightening and so rewarding and so fulfilling. And whereas some people say that reading Nietzsche will make you a misogynist because he was a borderline incel himself, for me, reading him has made me appreciate women so much and so much more. And look at them for the wonderful creatures, passionate, emotional, dare I say irrational creatures that they are. I accept that irrationality. I think that's amazing. I think that's incredible. Because the rationality, the logical nature of men, that leads us to be boring. It leads us to be stupid, actually. Funny enough, being too logical makes you stupid. Women are actually the ones, when they're in touch with their femininity, when they're in touch with their passions, and they don't buy into these modern, feminist lies, again, because it's not actually supporting women, it's trying to make women more like dudes. When they're not corrupted by that, when you meet a woman like that, is the most refreshing thing ever. This is why I was so drawn to my girlfriend now. When I met her, I was kind of going through an F-boy phase. I was dating 3 other women. They were all Westerners. She was from Asia. And there was something about her, man. And this is the thing that it was about, is her passion for life. Her her unbridled passion and femininity that wasn't corrupted by this Western influence of what she should be, that was against her nature. I love that stuff, man. And I still love her to this day about that. And reading that from Nietzsche really helps me appreciate her and appreciate women as a whole as well. Now, it's unfortunate some people will take a surface level reading of Nietzsche and then use that as evidence of like, this is why women are bad. Again, they're operating from the assumption that being logical, being rational, being more Apollonian is inherently better than being the opposite, more Dionysian, more passionate, right? So I hope I was able to clear this up, that Nietzsche loved women, that his supposedly misogynistic takes were not misogynistic at all. It's actually quite the opposite. And if you perceive him as misogynistic, it's because you're operating off of the presupposition that being logical and rational is better than being emotional and passionate, which is something that we were taught from a young age. So I don't blame you. Reading Nietzsche helps you love humanity more. It helps you love women more as well. And I hope I was able to convey that in this video. If not, I apologize. But thanks for sticking with me to the end. I hope I presented this as good as I possibly could. I really love making this video, actually, now that I'm talking about it now. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.